Intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves, and they create obstacles that often are not understood within conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have.
Hello, I'm Kim and I'm an artist at Currently Kimmy and I'm a sustainable fashion reseller.
So I'm Ollie. I work at Nottingham Street Food Club. I run the events there, the outdoor events, do all the marketing there. And yeah, I'm from Nottingham and I love this stuff.
Hi, my name's Toni and I work with the community.
Hello, my name is Saziso and I am a cultural producer and curator based in Nottingham.
Hi, my name's Hamish, I'm 31 and I'm from London. I work for a charity and I also DJ. Back in 2007, I moved up to Nottingham to study and it became my home for 6 years. I was also quite involved in the local music scene during that time.
As with many people, I've been aware about green issues and some of the issues related to the planet for a long time. But in terms of actually becoming conscious about these issues and actually doing something about it in terms of my behaviours, I would say maybe in the last few years or so. So a lot of it has really been about changing my behaviours in terms of how I can live a more kind of sustainable life and obviously contribute to kind of helping the planet as well. I would say that one of the steps that I've taken is eliminating my consumption of plastic goods. So I think one of the bigger ways that I was consuming plastic was through bottled water, as you do when you're out and about, purchasing bottled water here and there. It's a really easy thing to do. Of course, it's convenient, but it's something that I've kind of reduced quite a lot and do less of. And so in terms of changing my behaviour, with shopping, I tend to kind of try and buy second-hand clothes, like from Depop or eBay or like charity shops. And it's not just about buying them in terms of recycling, it's just a great way of also like finding those gems or getting really good finds that probably sold out in the shops or I can't get anywhere else. So kind of changing my behaviour through kind of consumption of plastic and just like trying not to buy as many new clothes that I don't need as well. And I would also say another one is that I've started to do recently is kind of just changing the behaviours of my diet. I'm kind of trying to consume less meat, particularly beef, because obviously cow farming just have a massive, the demand of cow farming has a massive impact on the planet. Obviously methane gases and whatnot, so that's another kind of step that I'm taking and just reducing my intake of meat as well.
I think I always had a sense of injustice and I always had a sense of right and wrong. So then basically, as I got older, climate change just became a big thing. It just became obvious that we were consuming way too much as a society, and I was just seeing and feeling the sense of pollution and stuff, like being like, why? I used to cycle a lot, so I'd always taste it in my mouth, like cycling past these cars. And I think the real big point where I got involved with environmental issues was I was working at a call centre where the car park was like 3 times the size of the actual call centre, and it was in an industrial estate in Manchester, and I just thought, this is not right. Like how is there more space taken up for the cars to get people there, which often people are just doing one person in the car and they're all coming from Manchester's not huge, like why can't they all get in the same car and all that kind of stuff. And that was like a big point where I'd already was interested in climate change and the fact that the ecological disaster that we were facing in relation to the extinction rates of animals, that was another thing I was very aware of. But then when I was seeing it firsthand, sort of how unethically humans were living, it was from that point that it was a springboard to me doing a degree, a master's in environmental governance. And And that's where my whole love and my whole passion for environmental issues really started to kickstart. And I loved it. It was the best experience of my life. It really taught me, and that's something I would say to anyone. Education's always there.
Okay, I guess I'm pretty ordinary in that I don't have an affiliation with any particular group, but I've always been interested in the impact of, I don't know, just outdoor space and greenery in my own life. I think it traces back to childhood. I personally believe that a childhood that's spent outdoors has a massive impact on how you embrace the green lifestyle in the future. For me, as a young black female, the outdoors was a great leveler. I used to spend, I would say, pretty much every waking hour outdoors playing. Myself, my siblings, we found every patch of land that was available that had fruit on it, blackberries, apples, ropes to swing over, rivers as we called them. There were probably little trickles of some dirty water from a sewer pipe, but to us it was a river. And I remember a lot of swings attached to tree branches that we used as, kind of adventurous play. But yeah, I guess it was very much about the outdoors and adventures and embracing, whatever fruit and vegetation we could steal from people's gardens. There was a lot of that going on, but it was really normal in those days. You could be out all day, you could knock on somebody's door, get a glass of water, you would never dream of it now, but also just exist on the blackberries and apples, and that was in the middle of Aspley. Nobody would think of Aspley in those terms now, but that's how it was. And I was saying to a friend very recently that we spent so much time naming flowers, picking flowers, making daisy chains was a thing. It wasn't just what you did occasionally, it was a real thing. And getting buttercups and pop them under your chin and going, do you like butter? I remember those moments so well. And when I look back, I can remember that as just ordinary. I don't see kids doing that so much now. I could name beetles, I wasn't scared of insects. Life was pretty good, and it just always felt like it was summer. It probably wasn't. And again, I was saying to a friend that turning of the seasons was a real thing. You absolutely knew it was autumn because the helicopters, as we call them, would fall off the trees and twizzle to the ground, and you would get a bag full or collect a load in your hand, throw them in the air and watch them and race them. I remember conquering, I remember the seasons, and it had such an impact on how I grew up. And as a young black girl, as I say, I think the outdoors was a great leveler. If you were a tough girl and you could get on a rope swing and swing across the river and, nearly break your leg doing it, but fall down reasonably safely on the other side, you were in with the boys, and that was great. So yeah, my experience of green issues isn't issues with a big I, it's more the everyday, and that's what I really miss for my own child and what I miss for other people's children. And I think that's what interests me about the green agenda. It's the ordinary stuff, it isn't the big issues actually.
The thing I've found that I've been doing personally for a few years now is trying to support companies, businesses, initiatives that are kind of green themselves, trying to buy products from places that are carbon neutral, for example. That's something that I found can be done quite easily. People often think it's more expensive, but it's often the same. For example, bulb as an energy provider, totally renewable energy, costs exactly the same, if not sometimes cheaper than other energy companies. So just moving your bills over in the house you live in, that's quite a really easy change to make. So that's something I've found is really easy to do.
I'm really passionate about the environment and climate change. I think it stems from growing up in a developing country from a young age and then coming over into the West, and the combination of living in the Far East in the Philippines as well as then coming to the UK. I guess I was privileged enough to be able to understand both sides of the coin of the world and where it sits, and really kind of question what is important in the world, and it has to stem with how we exist on it, on the planet, and how we can make it a better place for everyone.
So the barriers that I feel people, I think money is a major issue. It's really hard to be environmentally sound if you are struggling. If you're trying to feed mouths, or you're getting this thing of, oh, climate change, we need to do more. Well, I can't feed my family. So why should I suddenly start to make different choices in my life when my life currently is difficult to even maintain at a level which is above the poverty line, or even within the poverty line? So I think financially, like, there's a huge strain, and the issue, and the worst thing about it is that all of the impacts of environmental issues, certainly in cities, if you look at air quality and access to green spaces and things like that, the major people who are impacted are the ones who are the most deprived. So they're the ones who are being told to do more, yet they're the ones who are being impacted the most and are struggling to actually be able to even consider. And actually the education is another thing. So money is one thing, but actually who's actually out there explaining that actually some behaviour, some shifts in how people operate could actually be economically better for them and improve their children and their own mental health and their lives. There's just not the information out there for those people. So I think that's another one. And also I think with the environmental thing, I mean, one big thing obviously a lot of people talk about is planes and stopping people flying, which a lot of people are like, well, why should I not go on holiday now so that my son can go on holiday in the future? And I think that's a major thing, is this time barrier. We use these numbers like 20 by 2050 or by 2060. People don't even know what next month's going to look like. People don't even know what next year's going to look like. And then we're trying to throw these numbers out there, 2040, 2050. It's completely incomprehensible to people. It's so far away that how would anyone feel, right, I'm doing this in 30 years time, I'm doing this for 20 years time? It's just not how we operate as humans. We operate in the here and now, and in a survival and as selfish individuals. We are extremely selfish animals. Like, we operate on, what do I want and what do I need now? That's what I'm going to do. Because 20, 30 years, well, I'll be dead, or I'm going to be old, or this, that, and the other. So why should I change my behaviour now to potentially impact on the future? And another thing as well is that the way, I suppose it's going back to education, is the way that science is portrayed to us. Like, so they talk about the 4 degrees warming or 2 degrees warming, so like a major thing that they say is 2.5 degrees level that we're going to of warmth, and that's going to cause a whole lot of drama around the earth, for want of a better word. And that's all. Okay, so example, yesterday was 17 degrees, today is 22 degrees, that's 5 degrees warm. And so people have that kind of idea, it's like, well, 2 degrees warming, nice, it'll be a bit hot. Obviously it's an average, and again it comes down to education, like these statistics that they're using and the way in which they're trying to convey the science to people to make people think more about their actions is wholly insufficient, in my opinion. And it just either makes people turn off from it because they just can't comprehend it, or it just confuses people, and to the point where they think it's all right and actually it's not. So I think, yeah, it's really difficult. And I'm not saying that I think it's been, the way things have been promoted is terrible, but I think there needs to be much more done on making it a lot easier for people to digest, to comprehend quite what we're facing.
When I think of environmental issues, again with a big I just feel overwhelmed. I feel helpless, I think catastrophe. That's what I think of in terms of green issues. I think that it frightens me, it makes me feel, as I said, powerless. So I think we, the ordinary we, experience green issues as big agenda politics, not something that we can get involved in. And you feel quite despairing of what the future holds. I think about the Amazon, I think about river pollution, I think about plastic, and it absolutely terrifies me. And I don't scare easy. I just feel that I cannot personally do anything about that. That is probably why I'm so interested in the ordinary. So in terms of barriers, I think the messaging is really, really tragic. I think, well, that's it, tragedy. It's a story of tragedy. It's a feeling that the earth is dying slowly and there's nothing we can do about it. So I think the messaging is a real issue. I also feel that the barriers, to answer the question, are massive if you are not, to put too fine a point in it, not white and middle class. I think a lot of people from ethnic minorities feel completely excluded from this discussion, and also class. If you're a working class white woman, the sort of girl I went to school with, you feel like it's them, those people over there who have the control, and you don't have any say.
I think one of the big barriers to getting people to engage in environmental issues is what I would say is a class divide. It's a lot easier to say, how can I reduce my carbon footprint, and you know, what can I do to live a greener life? What can I do to be more environmentally friendly? It's a lot easier to ask yourself those questions and think about those things when you're not struggling to put food on the table, when you're not worried about your landlord evicting you and your children, when you're not worried about your kid getting stabbed on the way home from school. It's a lot easier to think about environmental issues when you're not going through multiple other societal issues, challenges yourself. So I think by default, it's a lot kind of easier and for people to engage in environmental issues when they live a comfortable lifestyle, because people are naturally going to be more concerned with things that are having a direct impact on them, that are in their immediate environment on a day-to-day basis. The air we breathe is, but it's not quite the same as as many of the other societal issues that affect a person's life. So I think there's a class divide, and that is a barrier in people engaging, and I think that's only exacerbated by the fact that you only really see middle class people talking about the issue and highlighting the issue in the public eye. I think it's great what Greta Thunberg has done to raise awareness of the climate crisis around the world over the last year or so. But I would ask the question, how many children and people from disadvantaged communities can relate to her and the people going to these climate marches, because I've been myself, and trust me, it's a middle class thing. Like there's not people there that are there at the Black Lives Matter marches, protests. It's not the same crowd, and when I talk about class divide, that's what I mean. It's very much a middle class thing. So I think the question needs to be asked is how do we engage people from less advantaged communities, disadvantaged communities, in environmental issues? How do we engage people that are possibly facing a lot of other existing challenges in their day-to-day lives? I think another barrier to getting people to engage in environmental issues is the fact that we seem to be living through a war on truth. There's a lot of misinformation flying around, especially on social media and the internet, with regards to the climate crisis, climate change, environmental issues. There's a lot of disinformation, a lot of obviously vested interests from large energy companies and so on in putting fake news out there. So I think that information, having access to accurate information is a barrier. If someone spends most of their time on social media and gets most of their news from social media and YouTube and so on, that can be a barrier. I think that in the same way we've seen this division on race engulf the world in the last few months. I think we are at risk of the same thing happening with regards to the climate crisis. I talked about a class divide, but I think there is, I also think there's, to some extent, a political divide on this issue. I think if you engage in a greener lifestyle, if you are vegan, if you are, if you're all about environmentally friendly things, that there is quite a widespread view in this country that you're a bit of a lefty and you're a liberal and all of that. When actually we're talking about the environment that everyone lives in. It affects everyone, and so this comes back to the point on misinformation, but I do think a barrier is this kind of us and them divide that exists in politics. It exists when it comes to race. It exists with Brexit, and I think that because it tends to be more liberally minded people who engage with environmental issues, I think there's a danger of that divide happening in this field as well.
I think there's so many distractions that take away from what is important all the time. We have a lot of information that is fed to us on a daily basis, like through our phone, through the internet, through social media, through news channels, and I think it's too easy sometimes to pick and choose and react to certain things, and not realising that the climate needs to be addressed, and green issues needs to be addressed, for people to be able to understand it and either be an activist of it or look inwardly within themselves and realise how that they can change or benefit or better their living circumstances.
At school, we learn, of course, about the ozone layer and whatnot, but that's the only thing that I remember learning about when it came to kind of like the planet and how some of our behaviours are affecting the planet. But we never really learned how, what we could do to, little things that we can change in our everyday life and our behaviours to kind of work towards making the planet better. It was very much from an academic side of things and theory as well. So in terms of like recycling, at the time when I was at school, we didn't really have like recycling bins, or it wasn't really promoted that much. It was almost seen as an optional thing. So I think for some people, there isn't that education where it's kind of like, look, this is something that we need to have as part of our everyday life. Like we all have, every single human being has maybe not newborn babies, but you get where I mean, where I say every single human being has a human beings have a responsibility to do our part to look after the planet. And, as the planet is kind of providing for us, we need to kind of give back. There seems to be a bit of a class divide sometimes, I think. I feel like maybe people from like upper classes are kind of kind of like talking down to those working kind of class backgrounds, you know, like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. And sometimes it can seem a bit contradictory when you look at the lifestyles of people who are, again, from my observations, lifestyles of people who are kind of speaking about green issues. It almost kind of, their lifestyles contradict what they're preaching. And sometimes I find that. And so people don't like being told what to do. And so when you kind of sometimes see the hypocrisy, you know, people aren't likely to take it seriously as well. I think in terms of kind of like particularly Afro-Caribbean communities, it's not something that is not really spoken about, kind of being green, being more sustainable. I think people don't see it as them kind of making the use of what the planet is offering us and kind of saving on, kind of buying from supermarkets and actually in a way contributing to helping the planet as well, I suppose. So I think it's about letting people know that there are things that they're already doing, or things within their normal behaviours that are actually helping the planet. And maybe it may be a case of letting people know that there's maybe a little bit more than you could do, or it could just be about saying to people, look, you're doing your part, continue to do that. And I think that might be quite encouraging for some people.
I really love hearing about initiatives that are ordinary, low level. In this particular example, they tried a traffic calming measure, which was a massive giant planter in the middle of a road. So instead of having a barrier, a road barrier, you know, the traditional kind of bollard cone type thing, which is quite aggressive, they just planted a huge box, and it was full of fruit, vegetation, and it meant that people they got the message, you're not allowed to drive this particular route. But how nice to have something that's living and growing. It softens the message, and it's a positive for the community because it's something beautiful to look at. So I like stuff like that. My own particular interest is in sort of guerrilla planting. I'm sure you've heard about these people who go around with packets of seeds, wandering around the streets, dropping the odd poppy seed or whatever into a space that needs prettying up a bit. I love that idea. I love the idea of that because it's a little bit naughty, but also I like it because it's kind and free. You're doing that. You may never see those plants grow, but the idea that you're doing something that in years time will be of benefit to a mum walking a little boy to school on school run is lovely. So I like that. And I'm sure people have heard of rewilding. I'm not a Twitter user, but I did actually look myself, I think the term is follow. I followed Isabella Tree on Twitter because she's doing an amazing job of rewilding her land. I just think it's phenomenal. She has got amazing stories to tell about how she changed the use of her land and essentially brought nature back. She had such hostility. So there's no way in which this is a soft option. You'll get objections, other farmers saying, why are you doing that? Because obviously it's a challenge to their traditional way of doing things. But anyway, that's an example of that combining of public goods, the naughtiness, the wildness of it, and the letting nature take control. It's a real interesting story. So I guess I like stuff like that because it harks back to childhood when the great outdoors was for everyone.
I think, education is fundamental, but more things like this and going to schools like Green Hustle can be spreading information and educating people who potentially at home are not getting much information about this. I think certainly the youth, that's where this matters. That's why I became a geography teacher, because I realised that actually our generation, the reason what's inhibiting, so going back to the previous question, like what's inhibiting things progressing, our generation is what it is. Like we're stuck in our ways. Like we've had this life. We've been able to live buying new phones every 2 months or 2 years. have new trainers whenever we want, like buy fashion from which travels all around the world before it ends up here. Like, we've had that. Like, we have everything right now when we want it. And so, again, going back to what I was saying previously, like, to then rejig how people are going to operate is much more difficult than actually if you take a young person whose view of the world hasn't been shaped yet, and actually then if we can push all our resources and all of our focus, well, not all of it, but majority of it, because surely that is where it all relies on. Like, we as a generation have not done very well, and I use the term not done very well and nothing too more stronger than that, because as I say, there's a lot working against us. Like, people, companies, corporations have spent billions of pounds on trying to make us un-environmentally sound human beings, and now they're clawing back to try and green screen what they're doing and all this kind of stuff. And we're seeing a fight now, a sort of battle now on the high street and across the internet to say, look how sustainable we are and all this. And this is becoming a new cool thing, is to be sustainable, which is great. I'm happy to see it, but our generation has lost that battle. And whether it is because we bought into these advertisements, consumers and everything with reckless abandon that was given to us because of neoliberalism and capitalism, yes, that's what happened. But what we can do is, there is a new generation coming through, and we can educate them and give them the skills and the powers and the foresight to actually live a much more sustainable life. So my message to the city council, or to anyone who's involved in how we go about progressing, it has to be young people. It just has to be. Like, we can throw all we want at these green campaigns about the buses and about how our sustainable transport is and all that. Fantastic, it's great, but it's box ticking. It's just saying, right, well, we're doing our bit, just leave us alone for a while. Well, no, it has to go much further. The place at which change can happen is young people, because they're the creatives, they're the innovatives, and they're the ones who are going to have to live through this crisis, not us. And I think the more we can invest in and empower young people to understand quite where we're at an ecological level, and understand how this is their future and they can shape it. They 100% can, but they have to be, and they have to be part of the conversation. And I think that's it. I think so often all these decisions are made higher up, and again, it's another reason why a lot of groups, a lot of social groups, a lot of deprived areas in the city, which are most impacted by the climate or by environmental issues, let's be more democratic about it. Let's get more people in the conversation, because these are the ones who are being impacted. So why are they not having a voice when it comes to finding the solution? And I think, yeah, the more we can get young people around the table, and actually not round the table, we need them active. That's too much has been done round the table. We need people actually doing things. That's the problem. We live in this time where we'll say we're going to do something in 2030. Great. What, 10 years time? Well, what the hell are you doing in those 10 years? Am I wrong? So what are you doing in those 10 years? What, 2025? Great. So what are we going to do in those 5 years? What are we going to do then? Do now. Do something now. Not in 2 years' time, not in 5 years' time, not in the amount of time that it will take to pump the earth full of more poison and destroy more habitats and destroy more people's minds through this scourge to the planet that is capitalism, neoliberalism, and just all-out disgraceful consumerism that we all need to accept that we are complicit in, and that actually we can tear down through our own actions, through boycotting, through education, and through empowering people to stand up and say something and not accept the current status quo, because the current status quo is terrible, and it can be much better, and we can do better, because we as humans have innate amazing capacities. to learn, develop and change the course of history.
Thinking of ways to overcome these barriers and get more people to engage in environmental issues. I do think it needs to come from kind of grassroots. I think conversations with people and highlighting the benefits of moving towards a greener lifestyle, rather than highlighting the negatives of the way things are now. I think people are more likely to change if they know that this is going to be better for me, this is going to be cheaper for me, this is going to be easier, and actually I'm going to feel good for doing this. I think people are more likely to change from doing that than if you say all of this is going wrong and all of this is bad, so you're doing things wrong. So I think more events like this obviously will help. I do think a space to engage in these issues is really helpful as well. I think if there's a green space, if there's green spaces in the city, I think that's a perfect place to get people to come and engage in these issues and to talk about the environment, more so than standing on a concrete tarmac street surrounded by concrete buildings. One of the things that's really encouraged a lot of people to cycle, certainly in London, is the fact that loads of super highways have been built, loads of cycle lanes basically, huge network of cycle lanes. And so I think that's something that really encourages people to get on their bike rather than drive when they might. So I think it's amazing that Nottingham has a tram system, and perhaps there isn't as much of a need for cycle lanes around the whole city, but anything that encourages cycling, I think is great. If you're going to get people to engage, if you're going to get more people involved in living a greener lifestyle and getting behind these issues, then it needs to be made more tangible. Like I said earlier, it's very difficult for people to get behind something if they don't feel, experience, or see the impact that change makes.
The resources is always an issue that councils in particular become, they get unstuck on that, because there's always this imagined debt, In my view, this is a rich country, COVID or not. If the will was there, we could provide all that we need in terms of resources to improve people's lives, vis-a-vis what we're talking about here. In my view, the resources are there because the resources are people. The resources are, it's not some fantastic, flexible budget that we have to use here. I think the examples that were provided in the early days of the pandemic speak volumes. People were going out of their way to support their neighbours and try to, do what they could to help people that often they've never even met, people living on their own street. I personally don't, perhaps I'm a bit biased because I work with the community, but I don't think it is about money. It's about messaging and it's about mobilising. I think that most people have a packet of seeds in their house that are drying out. Most people have an ability to put a bit of time aside, even if it's just an hour a week. And most people have got access to some kind of creative, energy that would allow them to engage with a project that meant something to them. I think that the pandemic has shown us that we've got lots of untapped resources. So what the council can do is just to organise us. They don't have to give us anything. It's ours anyway, because it's the council, But in terms of specifically managing a project, I think what we need is community organisers those community organisers who are properly trained and empowered to do good work could easily bring together members of the community willing to put the time and effort into doing something useful in their own back garden. I was involved in my local church. We helped to dig a community garden. It was already there, but massively overgrown and let go by the council. Myself and others got together and we dug and we planted and we weeded. Got a bunch of freezing cold children to dig in the garden one day alongside the adults, and we did a lovely community garden. And all it takes is maintenance. None of us were paid. None of us had any particular talents and skills. We were just directed in terms of what we had to do by that community organiser. So that's what I'd like to see. I'm not talking about an army of highly paid individuals. Possibly at the apex you need that, but essentially you have community activists with a small c who are willing to do it, and it's so critical that those people span ages and races and experience and class. I personally, I know it sounds a bit hostile, but I'm sick to death of middle class do-gooders. We need people who are ordinary. We need Derek, we need Sheila, we need all those, we need Madge, we need Winston, we need Pomajit, we need them. We don't need somebody who's about to go off on their next Extinction Rebellion, kind of world tour. We need the ordinary people because they're the ones who stay. They're the people who clean, they're the people who are most affected. So yeah, that's what I think. We need resources in terms of people and organisers. We don't need money as such.
I think the council have a lot to answer for when it comes to uplifting these barriers for the local community and society to be able to push forward and create green spaces and better living. And it kind of stems with a lot of the building works, road works, new college builds, new broad marsh build, more student and uni housing, which isn't really needed. I think that the homeless issue should be addressed massively. And kind of listening to the community and doing events and reaching out to different areas, whether that's Sneinton or Forest Fields, Radford, Mapley Park, and making these little visits, doing a one-day event here and there, obviously primarily on the weekend where most people are available and open for all to attend, and just kind of get a sense of what people want in different areas and what is needed in different areas. I'm really lucky. I live in Sherwood, Carrington, Mapley Way, and I'm privileged enough to live in an area where there is lots of greenery, but there are places that I feel need more outdoor spaces, whether that's for simply taking your dog for a walk or taking your children outside to teach them about plants and trees and how to have a green thumb, recycling and, stopping littering. So yeah, I think barriers can be lifted, and it begins with the council. And then secondly, I believe it's then up to schools and education and colleges and universities to reach out to their staff and their students and to push forward material for people to read and access.
I'm really excited to see what happens with Green Hustle. I think it's a great initiative, and I believe it's something that's going to reach a lot of people and hopefully stir up or just become a catalyst for some change in the city. It's great that Nottingham City Council already have, I think the target is to become carbon neutral by 2030 or something like that. And if that's the case, they'll be possibly one of the first cities in the UK to be able to do so, if not the first. So that's really exciting. But let's make it fun. Let's make being green and looking after our planet and being sustainable fun. I think there are a lot of interesting ways that people can be educated, people can look at changing their behaviours a little bit. It doesn't have to be drastic change. It could be something like maybe if there's a piece of clothing that you no longer need, or it maybe doesn't fit anymore. There's ways let's educate people. Look, you can take your stuff to the charity shop, and that way you're doing a good deed, because not only are you recycling, but you are donating your clothes somewhere where someone would be able to buy that, and then that kind of goes to charity. Or if the clothes are not kind of like in great condition, there's different ways you can use textiles. Could you use that in a way that you could make something? I don't know, a t-shirt that's ripped but torn, but could you make like a face mask out of it, or I don't know, something like really cool, or something for like dolls or teddy bears. There's also ways, and there's also ways of kind of selling your clothes as well online. Depop or eBay is a great way of you making a little bit of money for yourself, and making new things out of containers or plastic, cardboard, reusing those kind of things to make fun crafts, art and crafts. I know that there are artists that recycle stuff, that use kind of like packaging and stuff to make their artwork, and also food as well, like eliminating food waste is a big one. So maybe kind of like educating people on how they can reuse certain things, certain dishes that they can make using leftover food. Like, there's lots of interesting ways that we can be educated. I think the main thing is about making it fun. Let's make being green and looking after our planet fun, because it can be.
Thinking about our local environment is obviously really important. Air quality and things that affect us locally are really important, but obviously we're part of the planet, and we need to think about how our actions impact the rest of the world. The charity I work for helps older people in poor places. I've been working in this field for a few years now, and it's clear that the changes to climate are having an impact already on the poorest people around the world, in the form of more severe and more frequent droughts, in the form of more severe and unpredictable weather patterns, storms, typhoons, flooding, and if we continue on the path that we are, obviously rising sea levels are going to put millions, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world in a really precarious situation, in a position where they will need to migrate. So while we do need to think about the local impacts of our actions, I think it's really important to also be obviously constantly aware of the impact that our actions have on the most marginalised people around the world.
And I think we're going to look at how we go about alleviating any mental health crisis that we're heading for, and it all comes down to community. It all comes down to education and community, and how we can start to make people feel part of and safer within their wider community. Because I think there's such we are lucky in Nottingham that we have large parts of the city centre that are multicultural. But what I'd like to see more is how people can start to have more discussions between the cultures. That it's not just like, okay, there's a more Caribbean area, there's a more Muslim area, there's a more Polish area. How do we start to get that conversation going? How do we start to get people to start? Because then that's where people feel safer, and that's where people feel more part of the community. And that by building that sense of community across the city, that hopefully we can start to bridge that so then everyone feels. But then obviously then you come down to an issue of, again, like class, and that feeling of, okay, well, why do they have that and I have this and I don't have as much as them? So it's really difficult. It's extremely difficult. But the more we can have these conversations, and the more people can start to consider that actually others do not. And I think that's it as well. It comes down to other people having a respect for the fact that other people do not have it as good as them. That thinking, as I say about that 11-year-old boy who I used to teach, living with 11 siblings in a 2-bedroom flat. Like, think about that when you think, oh yeah, maybe I don't have it that good, or think, oh, I've had a bad day, or this, that, and the other. Think about the people who are living in extremely difficult conditions, and what's going on in their lives, and thinking about, well, what can you do to, if you've got a blessed life and you're living all right, like, well, why don't you try and do more to try and help others, and try and build a community where people do feel part of the wider population, and that people can start to come together, because it's in those moments of coming together that we gain respect for one another, and that we hopefully can create a better, wider environment for everyone to enjoy, that they feel safer and more part of the city, or more part of the area that they're in.
This question asked, say, in January this year, would have been just an interesting question. But we've had this thing called a pandemic. I don't know if you've heard of it. People may have heard of COVID, what's it? But if we needed any illustration at all about the impact of being locked in your house without access to green space or just the outdoors, I swear I don't know what better experiment could have been envisaged by a government. I think the impact on people's mental health, and what I'm hearing, is really, really acute in certain cases. I have a garden. It's not massive. It's got nothing in it except maybe a bit of greenery in terms of a lawn and so on. But one of the best experiences I've had, bizarrely, through COVID was the horribly overgrown plant that I've got stuck in the garden. A bird would come in every single day for about 2 weeks. It would sit right in the middle of this overgrown plant. It would nick a bit of this plant off, bigger than its head, a huge bit of branch, and it would fly off. Every single day he came, and he was obviously building a nest. I knew about birds, but that's what it was doing. It was ever so strange. It was obviously the same bird every day. And I watched that bird, and I thought, oh, it's back again. And then I watched the crows fighting on my shed, and I watched pigeons bullying the other smaller birds in my garden. Now I've got that little bit of access to green space, and that did me good, because I worked throughout the pandemic in a very stressful job. So for me, that was excellent. And I just think to be robbed of those very small experiences is a crime. People need that. I can't imagine what it's like being in a tower block on the 5th floor with a buggy that you can't get down the stairs and young children. It must have been heartbreaking and stressful for a lot of people. There's many other people in similar circumstances who don't have buggies, don't have kids, but equally are locked in. People need green spaces so badly. And it was interesting that one of the first things that happened once that bit of lockdown was a bit easy was people ran to the parks. And the first thing the government did was to start almost bullying and nagging people out of those parks and the beaches. People need green space. I strongly believe in social prescribing, which is something that can be researched online. It's the thing. The NHS have got a wonderful little sort of, I don't know what you call it, it's a kind of illustration of what social prescribing is. I would encourage you to have a look at it. I'm in a position to, I work not so much now, but I have been in a position, professionally speaking, to socially prescribe things to people. There wasn't a term for it in those days. You could be laughed at if you said, go out and have a walk. But we're starting to wake up to the fact that people need community interaction. They need healthy activity which involves their community for them to stay mentally well. So I personally think that those people in those polluted, tiny boxes in the sky, and we've got other examples of poor housing, need it more than anybody. And it should be free and accessible and normal for everybody. But in certain circumstances, it needs to be organised and offered with some kind of, I don't know, well, on the NHS website talks about a personal plan. So I'm looking for that to happen. I think is the way forward, but with an intelligent, thought out response to what people need as individuals. But yeah, I strongly believe people need outdoor space, and I think it's well illustrated by what's happening during COVID, depression levels have, become really concerning in this country. I think literally it's people have been robbed of that opportunity.
Reflection. Is there anything else you want to say, or
I only want to say one other thing. I'm speaking with a level of bias here because I'm from a Caribbean background. I think that we in the Black community really need to think hard about who we are in terms of identity. What upsets me, and I've spoken to other Black friends about this, is the lack of interaction between Black people, outdoor space, countryside, outdoor activities. We need to start owning that as part of our lived experience. I was telling a friend, my grandmother came to England in 1977, Queen Silver Jubilee, and she said, I'm going to help you prune some roses. My mum had some roses in the front garden. And do you know what? I was only a little girl then, but you know what I thought? I didn't know Black people had roses in Jamaica. I always remember that. And she kind of just looked at me strangely. I was probably a strange little girl, I don't know. But I always remember that because I look back on that and I realise how much I had been urbanised out of the idea that Black people understand, can curate, benefit from and beautify their environment with plants. I thought of that very much as an old lady thing and a white thing. That's not to insult people who are not of my race, but it's that notion that gardening is not owned by white people, but we are mostly from a non-urban environment. But you wouldn't think that by the endless pop shows and stuff we see on television. We need to own that and see more representation of Garden's World or whatever it is. But we need more representation of Black people interacting with green spaces.
It's so easy to live in a kind of a metropolis and concrete jungle that you don't realise the benefits of then being surrounded by countryside or greener space that you feel like you can breathe. I feel like there's a lot of buildings that can seem almost like claustrophobic and stifling, and it's only until you get into open areas or you see blue skies and you see trees and there's wild herbs growing and you can kind of go foraging. You don't realise these little things do add to a more positive well-being until you decide to take yourself out just for a simple walk, whether that's on your own or with friends or with family. And I remember going for a walk and I went to Attenborough Nature Reserve, and I always forget to go there. And it's just this long trail, obviously, in a vast expanse of land just outside of the Nottingham city centre that I always forget about. But it's beautiful, and they have all these kind of information posts of these are the types of birds you're going to see and the different types of trees, and you see other people walking, and immediately they're greeting you and saying hello, and you just think, I don't know you, you're a stranger. When you're on the tube in London, it's like, don't look at me. But once you're outdoors and everyone has that idea and space of like freedom and breathing, suddenly everyone is much more calmer and more open to conversation and more open to approach a stranger to say how you do it. And I think that's so important.
Of being in like green spaces and stuff. I love going for walks, I love being in one with nature, and they're great. I mean, if you go to a park in the summer or the autumn, or when it's not too cold, you will see people gathering. I think parks and green spaces are naturally kind of spaces for gathering and for people to socialise in the outdoors, and I think that's really important. Having more of these spaces would encourage people to engage with nature a lot more, and I think that has an impact on health. First of all, people are getting out and kind of getting a little bit of exercise. People are being out in the sun, so there's vitamin D, which is important, and also I think people being being away from home. I think it's really important to kind of spend time in the outdoors and just be within like a different environment.